In Warhammer 40k, the White Scars are one of the most well-known chapters of Space Marines, a swift assault force descending like a lightning bolt on the enemies of the Imperium. But that description obscures a long and fractured past, stretching back to before the Horus Heresy, before they were reunited with their Primarch, Jagatai Khan, when they were the pioneers and outriders of the Emperor's Great Crusade. Hiya, welcome to Heresy 101. In this series, I'm going to go through the lore for each of Warhammer's Space Marine legions, particularly their origin in the grim days of the Horus Heresy. I'll take a look at where they are at the start of the Heresy and how they got there, and what happens to them during the Heresy, so be warned that this video contains spoilers for the Horus Heresy Black Books and Black Library novel series, and kind of everything else to do with the Heresy. At the conclusion of the Horus Heresy, the White Scars were one of only 3 legions who stood on the walls of the Imperial Palace on Terra, sentinels against the overwhelming forces of the War Master Horus. The rest either turned traitor or scattered across the galaxy. But for a long time, neither the Loyalists nor the traitors knew what side the 5th Legion would choose. The story of the 5th Legion starts early, like really early in Imperial history. As the Emperor brought the whole of Terra into compliance, the 20 Space Marine legions were being developed. The Emperor's armies already contained genetically altered troops like the Thunder Warriors or the Legio Custodes, but these new warriors were going to be something else. Much more stable and reliable than the Thunder Warriors, these new Astartes would have their genetics stabilized by 20 Primarch generals, demigods, to lead the Emperor's armies. And even though the Primarchs have been scattered across the galaxy in a conspiracy, the new Space Marines created from their genetic template had started to appear in the armies of unification, mostly as small units of a few hundred warriors as they waited for their numbers to grow. But for the 5th Legion, these small units were the point. The 5th were deployed to active duty right from the start as the outriders and scouts of the legions, operating in groups as small as 10 and traversing the desolate rad wastes of Terra ahead of the conquering Imperial armies. They sought out the hiding places and fortresses of the many warlords that held sway over Old Earth and conducted probing missions into their territory, weakening them before the arrival of the armies of unification. They were well suited to do this. Their initial recruits had been taken from the tech clans of Thule in the frozen north, where nomadic groups travelled across the salt wastes in ancient convoys. The clans were expert survivalists and capable machinesmiths, able to operate independently for long periods in the most inhospitable territory. The early 5th Legion operated like this, according to their own rules, unwilling to take orders from anyone save the Emperor, despite the protests of the Unification Army High Command. Known informally as the Star Hunters, they operated far from the centres of conflict, seen as outsiders to the rest of the army, and since they'd often departed and were moving on as the main Imperial war machine arrived, their actions were often unrecorded. As the Emperor's Crusade continued into the solar system, the 5th Legion had already been dispatched out into the darkness, known as the Pioneer Companies, charting the borders of alien territory, seeking out new worlds and new civilizations, boldly going... Anyway, each of these companies was an independent force, and like on Terra, outsiders from the main body of the Imperium. Each developed its own culture and tactics, but common was a need for hit-and-run warfare. So often were they pitched against much larger forces. The Pioneer Companies were the eyes and ears of the Great Crusade, and discovered a lot of the Primarchs. In fact, when a company of the 5th came across Chthoniya, homeworld of the Primarch Horus, their reports noted that the world was a nest of serpents coiling in the dark we'd be better to destroy. Apparently Horus really liked that and later requested that company as the Pathfinders for his fleet. The favour would be returned years later when a Lunar Wolves fleet accompanied by Horus and the Emperor discovered the world of Chagoris and the 5th Primarch, Jagatai Khan. Chagoris was a world of open plains which had developed to a medieval level of technology, split between a single great empire in the east of its single continent and a steppe land in the west known as the Empty Quarter, and populated by rival tribes of horse nomads. The infant Primarch was adopted by the leader, or Khan, of one of these tribes, going through the same coming-of-age rituals as any other tribesman. The raids on rival tribes, the hunts, and the ritual scarification of his face that marked him as a member. But it was an attack by a rival tribe that would be the turning point in Jagatai's life. His father was killed, and he, as the new Khan, swore revenge. Instead of a raid, Jagatai descended on his rivals with an army that left no one alive, and as his reputation spread, his army kept on, carving a trail across the empty quarter, offering a single choice to his enemies: join him or be destroyed. Within a few decades, he had united the tribes and was called the Khagan, the Khan of Khans. And when that great empire to the east targeted him in a hunt, he led the tribes to war against it, killing its emperor and becoming ruler of the entire world. When the emperor's armies arrived a few years later, the emperor praised him as a great empire builder, but Jagatai saw the truth, that while he could see the merit in the emperor's dreams of unity, he was being offered the same choice his tribes had offered others: join the Imperium or be destroyed. And so he bargained for his loyalty, agreeing to join the Emperor on the condition that Chogoris was left as it was, spared the industrialization common to Imperial worlds. The Khan was inducted into the technology and culture of the Imperium quickly and without much delay. He was obviously a great commander and empire builder, and the Emperor wanted him on the front lines of the Crusade, not learning how to function in the Imperial court, but his legion was spread across the galaxy in hundreds of disparate armies. He was master of a legion of vagabonds, a situation that might have sat less well with others of his brethren, but was a challenge well suited to the Great Khan's talents and history. Just as he had on the vast plains of Chogoris, the Great Khan sought to build a conquering army from insular nomadic bands, and he began in the same fashion. He recruited as many Chogorians as he could to form a new corps for the Legion, and issued commands that all the old pioneer companies attend him on Chogoris. It took a decade for them all to arrive, small fleets and individual ships hanging in space and keeping to themselves, wary of each other. The Khan brought them all together, arrayed in their cohorts on the plains of Chogoris, and gave them a new culture. The rituals and traditions of the Chogorian tribes became those of the new White Scars. The traditions of the hunt, the superstitions, the scars on their faces, even the noble pursuits of poetry and calligraphy were encouraged amongst the Legion. As they left to rejoin the Crusade, his original Keshig, the Chogorian warriors he raised up, were dispersed through all the companies to lead by example, and slowly, as they fought on, the old pioneer companies became the White Scars. It was a good mix, the hit-and-run tactics and tenacity of the old 5th Legion, merging well with the speed and skill with a blade of the Chogorians. And during the Great Crusade to come, their victories were too numerous to count. But that independent nature and their cultural ties to Chogoris did make them outsiders to many in the Imperium, who saw them as savages no different to the wolves of Fenris or the World Eaters. They whirled into battle like a storm of bikes and blades and had no time for meticulous planning, preferring to sweep enemies before them with the speed of the hunt. But the White Scars were also disciplined and cultured, gathering knowledge and learning along with their victories. They were instrumental in the development of the librarian program, where the shamanistic traditions of their weather witches provided structure and restraint. These comparisons with what they saw as barbaric legions didn't sit well with them. The Khan, always at the centre of the battle, was only close to a few of his brothers, Horus, Sanguinius and Magnus the Red amongst them. But the Legion as a whole was often overlooked by the more orthodox legions, and as the Crusade neared its end and less of the galaxy remained to be discovered, there were fewer wild spaces for them to make war as they liked. In fact, one of their final campaigns before the Heresy was in concert with the Lunar Wolves, Ultramarines and Blood Angels, the Elinor Crusade, where the Imperium finally defeated the largest Orc empire ever encountered. At the end of the Crusade, Horus was declared War Master, and the Khan was there on the platform next to him. So when the Heresy started, much of the Imperium were unsure which side the White Scars were going to be on. At the start of the Heresy, the White Scars were estimated to have an active strength of about 90,000 legionnaires, which made them one of the smaller legions, though not the smallest. Their number was hard to measure accurately though, since the Legion used its own system of organisation, based around the Brotherhood, commanded by a Khan, and with multiple Brotherhoods arranged into hordes under the command of a Noyan Khan. Each Brotherhood was a specialised formation built around a specific task. Given how the White Scars preferred to fight, typical Brotherhoods were built as rapid strike formations. All their warriors either mounted on jet bikes or speeders or deployed in transport vehicles, whatever best suited the preferences of its Khan. Close assault and recon brotherhoods were also common. However, artillery, support, or armoured brotherhoods also existed, and the numbers of marines in each of those varied, so the size of a brotherhood, and therefore the size of a horde, could vary wildly, from a few hundred Astartes to many thousands. This sometimes made it really difficult for Crusade Command to estimate the size of a force or the logistics required to support them. The White Scars' preferences also resulted in a number of other differences from more standard legions. Their dreadnoughts, the Uhan Solban, were few in number and rarely seen on the battlefield. Their position as honoured former warriors meant they served as guardians of the Legion's relics and gene seed laboratories instead. The Legion disdained the use of destroyer squads, the phosphex and rad weaponry they used being seen as totally antithetical to the Legion's way of war and their respect for the natural world. Any destroyer squads the Legion did field were covered in charms to ward off evil spirits and put under the direct command of the Stormseer Council, which is the other big difference. The White Scars had a long tradition of using psykers. These Stormseers served as advisors for the Khans and guardians against ethereal powers, and their mastery of the warp was subtle, cautious, and studied, in stark contrast to legions like the Thousand Sons. The Stormseer Council was so important to the White Scars that it continued unchanged well after the Edict of Nicaea, where the Emperor banned the legions from using a Librarius. Their story during the Heresy is also a bit more complex than most legions. As outsiders to much of the Imperium, Horus thought there was a good chance he might be able to persuade the Khan to his side, and while events unfolded in the Istvan system, he kept the White Scars engaged far away, in the Chondak system, hunting the remnants of the Orc Empire destroyed at Elinor. An Alpha Legion fleet were assigned to keep the White Scars busy there and block communications, but this failed. A message got through. It's questionable if that was intentional or not because, Alpha Legion, but this left the White Scars trying to figure out the truth. Rogaldorn's message said that Horus had turned traitor, but the Alpha Legion said that Liman Rus of the Space Wolves had turned traitor and attacked the Thousand Sons. With no clear information, the White Scars decided to see for themselves and broke through the Alpha Legion blockade, heading directly to Prospero and ignoring a besieged Space Wolves force. In the ruins of Prospero, the Khan discovered a shard of his brother, the Primarch Magnus the Red. And after a confrontation with Mortarion of the Death Guard, it all gets a bit Avengers around here, the Khan finally learned the truth, siding with the Loyalists after all. However, the warrior lodges, so popular amongst the traitor legions, had spread their way into the White Scars. And the lodge members, hopeful that their Primarch would see sense and join Horus, attempted a coup. Jagatai, in punishment, executed the ringleaders and sentenced the rest to become Magyar Mazan, exiles from the Legion whose only purpose was to harry the enemy until their inevitable death. For the 4 years after this, the bulk of the White Scars engaged in hit-and-run attacks on the traitor forces, including a lengthy series of engagements with the Emperor's children, before finding a way to bypass the Ruin Storm in the Warp and arrive at Terra. Along with the Imperial Fists and the Blood Angels, they formed the main defending force of the Imperial Palace, holding the line, conducting raids on the advancing enemy, and eventually leading a mass assault to retake Lion's Gate spaceport from the newly transformed Plague Marines of Mortarion, which massively reduced Horus's ability to land new troops. They continued to fight in defense of the palace until the very end, and beyond that into the period known as the Scouring, hunting traitors as far as the Eye of Terror. And that's the 5th Legion. Always an independent, self-reliant but fractured force, their disparate parts were pulled together and given the stamp of Chakorian culture to bind them, by a Khan who, while not the most enthusiastic supporter of the Imperium, operated on the same basic desire for unity as his father. As the Legion split into chapters after the Heresy, it's that culture that defines the White Scars all the way into the 41st millennium. Thanks for watching. Okay, if you'd like more of these, there'll be another Legion just coming up to the right there, and if you'd like to see these videos ahead of time or support the channel, there's a Patreon link in the thing below. See ya!